And we are recording. Thank you very much for listening to the Barbell Nerds podcast. Today, we are joined by the Senior Manager of Education and Training of USA Football, Mr. and Coach Andy Ryland. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sean, it's obviously, we've been chatting for a while, so it's great to finally get face-to-face, even if it is digitally, and do this. Will, obviously, great to meet you pre-pressing the record button, but I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk a little chop and chat a little bit.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we'll definitely be able to connect a little bit more after this and all that, and stay in touch. But for the listeners that don't know who you are or what you do, maybe they just know you as the Grappling Guy, because that's kind of how I've coined you. Hope that title is okay with you.
Yeah, so it's a little background. So we share a very cool little alma mater spot there. So multi-sport athlete growing up, like all kids in our generation, my generation, was lucky enough to be able to play football at Penn State. But I went to college with the 100% mind frame that I was going to be a strength and conditioning coach. So I've told everyone, like, a lot of athletes, kind of fall into strength and conditioning when their athletic career is wrapping up. I kind of knew I wanted to be a strength coach when, I was like 19. I think I started undecided. And by my sophomore year, I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And so my kinesiology department, movement science, loved it. By the time it all shook out, I was a two-sport athlete at Penn State, rugby and football. I have 8 career starts at football, so that tells you how good I was. Like, 8 is not a lot of career starts.
Dude, I have 0 if it makes you feel any better.
So career backup, all of my starts were due to injury. In fact, like, somebody tweaks an ankle, you start 3 weeks, they get healthy, you're back on the bench. So I was better at rugby than I was at football. I spent 3 years with the U.S. national team. And so that, and I always bring that up because that really exposed me to a different coaching methodology and different coaching style, because the games are so different. Obviously, the huge European influence, the definitely some difference in the ways that they coach and address their athletes in the games, and then the structures of the game. Well, while all this is going on, my football coaches actually convinced me that, like, you may have a knack for the sport coaching thing. So I'm probably the one guy who went the opposite route, who wanted to be a strength coach and turned into a sport coach. And so I worked in college football for 3.5 years, and then I got the job at USA Football, Senior Manager of Education and Training. So I'm involved in our coach education program. So everything we do to educate coaches kind of comes out of our department. So whether it's youth or high school coaches, I'm involved in the building and the presentation of those materials. I've done I guess we'll call it some consulting. I think the thing that I may do well that people seem interested in is I tell people I speak 3 languages. I can speak rugby, football, and strength and conditioning. I can act as a translator a lot of times and share conversations and talk about sports skills and high performance managers, and how does the shape of practice affect the physical outputs of our players, and how can we look to adjust that during the week and match athletic qualities with the weight room we're doing on the field. And I'm like, actually, that's a language I can speak. Let me see if I can help communicate these things. And so I really enjoy that at the kind of high performance level in the college. Do some work in tackling contact specifically in the college and kind of with higher level coaches. And then we were getting ready to release a program at USA Football called Prep for Contact, which was aimed at getting youth athletes ready for the collision contact nature of football. So how do we prepare the body, and how do we address the psychological aspects of 2 youngsters running into each other at full speed who may have never been in someone else's personal space until they step on a sporting field, right? And then I did a webinar for here Wenham Flat Strength Coach Network, and it just so happened that webinar on grapple training for high-level sport came right when COVID came. And this could have been like a tree falls in the woods and nobody could hear it, but all of a sudden, like, tumbling and crawling and grappling, because everyone was in isolation and didn't have access to a weight room, became like a really cool topic that people were interested in. And I've just got the speak quite a bit about that recently, and maybe why people refer to me as like hey, that's the grappling crawling guy. Like, no, I swear I coach football and I lift heavy weights too. But yeah, that's how we got here.
Everybody needs a hobby, right? But no, I've loved the stuff that you put out from an education standpoint. Everything from talking about leverages of the body, angles of the body, to be able to not only just properly tackle and safely tackle, but just being as consistent and getting that pattern over and over and over again, so that way the body can self-organize into a good tackle. I think I was listening recently kind of to prepare for this. Your podcast on Just Fly with Joel, you talked about bandwidth and the athlete having the bandwidth and the capability, the knowledge about how to self-organize. Can you explain just a little bit what you mean by having that bandwidth?
Yeah, so we teach out of really a KPI-based system. And I mean, you could call it fluctuators and attractors. You can call it, whatever your terminology is. But, there's definitely self-organization that happens in the chaos of sport. But I always use this analogy that we have 100 years of film on football. Like, we're pretty confident that there are some things we feel good are about being associated with positive outcomes. So it's not like we're just making up as we go. We're trying to hit some landmark positions. We know there's some certain actions, with our lower body, whether it's leg drive or whether it's the clamp and grip and the upper body grapple. Like, we know that those are associated with a high quality tackle. So we want to know what these KPIs and these landmarks are. And then we're going to respect the chaos of the game, which is going to give the athlete the bandwidth of how you get there is probably going to be 1,000 different ways. But like, if I get a bad read or I get a good read, we'll say, like, as a football player, that's going to get me to the spot in two very different situations. One, I'm ahead. I'm easily able to set up. I have time. Decision making isn't stressed. Let's say I get a bad read, and now all of a sudden I'm late to the spot. Well, now everything's rushed and everything's crazy. So how I move, how the blocker engages me. By the way, the other guy's on scholarship too. He's starting running back for a reason. He's trying to make your life miserable. So like, all these things are going to play out. But if I can hit those good positions, like we talked about, to generate quality power, if I have the right spinal alignment to be able to, brace the core and stay strong through that collision aspect. If my shin angles and my lower body are in a position that I can, generate force back into the ground and actually gain ground against that resistance versus, if I'm squatting with vertical shins and run into a 225 running back, I can tell you where you're going to end up, and it's going to be on his highlight film. So like, we know what the right positions are. Now we have to make sure we're challenging athletes to be able to get into them and, just to make it easy, as many crazy ways as possible. Like, let's stress them, but make sure they can hit these landmarks so they can execute the task. And I think that's the beauty of the KPI system, is that you're respecting, self-organization and chaos, but you're also telling the athletes, like, there's some things that we think we want to do to be really good at this. Now, let's make sure you know what they are. We'll maybe drill them slowly, so that you have a good kinesthetic feel. Kind of becomes an anchor point that you're now searching for on the field. You know where it is. You know what the tension feels like in your hamstrings and your low back when you're in those good positions. And now I can kind of search for that amidst the chaos, instead of just either one, trying to be a robot technician, which isn't going to work when things are stressed, or I'm just completely like, overwhelmed, and then I lose all semblance of the positive things that we know are associated with good outcomes.
When you're doing all of your education, your coach education, do you see a common theme, like a common mistake from coaches when they're trying to teach tackling? Maybe they come up and tell you about a certain drill that you see a lot of teams do that maybe it isn't necessarily as effective as some techniques or some methods that you might use with the athletes you work with?
Yeah, so we have a technical model, like, for our tackle, and it's based on our KPIs. And obviously, we wouldn't teach it if we didn't think that was the best technical model. Coaches, have different technical models as long as it's a safe model, you know what I mean? As far as like head placement, spinal alignment, those kind of health and safety things, we understand that there's differences. It's just the nature of coaching. I think the biggest challenge comes in, as you mentioned, the programming of drills, where we're probably not, I use the term ruthless just because it sounds cool, but maybe forensic enough with like our evaluation. And so we tend to get a lot of drills that look like there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. But my lens that I say, like, here's what every coach should ask themselves: what makes it hard on game day? And all of a sudden you realize that, like, hey, look, we're moving, we're reacting to a stimulus, the coach is pointing, players are doing something, but all of the things that make it hard on game day, you've actually removed, and you're just like it feels good, but it's false development. And I think coaches get stuck in that very easily. It's like the change of direction agility stuff, where like, okay, we don't want to be the change of direction team, so the coach is pointing left and right, and you're like, but doesn't the research say that like the visual stimulus has to be associated with the actual motor skill problem as presented in the game? So the coach pointing isn't actually training an athlete how to read the subtle hip movement, shoulder shake, and changing lower body angles of an athlete who's about to make a cut. So it feels good, but I'm not actually getting better at trying to tackle a top quality player. We have a moving bag, and there's a place for that. It's a great place to start. But just because the bag is moving and I'm doing a moving tackle doesn't mean that, like, when a player is using a lot of subtle movements, they're changing pace, they're chopping their feet, they open up their hips and shoulders to feint the cutback and then reaccelerate. I need to get repetitions at actually seeing that, so I can get good at reading a human being and taking the correct angle. Taking the correct angle on a bag is often fairly easy because it doesn't possess the subtle deception that offensive players actually have. And the final thing I'll say is coaches generally do the same drills for way too long. So as I was talking to strength and conditioning guys, I always use this example. If you had a 12-week off-season program and you didn't progress the exercise in weights or repetitions, or you just did 3 sets of 5 day one, and then week 12 you did 3 sets of 5 with the same weight, you wouldn't be a very good strength and conditioning coach, and you wouldn't achieve a lot of adaptation. Well, if I do the same drill, week 1 of preseason, and then this is a staple, it's a fundamental. We're doing the same drill week 12 in the season. You're thinking, wait, your players haven't gotten to the point where this drill is no longer beneficial because their skill development is clearly way above this entry-level drill. And we think like, oh, rote mechanics, movement memorization, but we never actually layer speed, stress, decision-making, chaos. And so we stick with the drill for too long instead of taking maybe the S&C lens of how can I progress this once we have some pretty good mastery of it, and start layering new decision-making, new challenges, new stimuluses to make it more realistic and more game-like.
And do you do much, or do you differentiate much between tackling and maybe getting off blocks, or an offensive lineman going to make a block? Is there a lot of like the carryover between the two skills? Is there a lot of carryover, or are they two totally separate things that you have to approach differently?
So I would say it's actually both. So like when it comes to any time we're in contact, there's some conceptual things that we clearly like apply to all contact skills. So, like being able to be rooted in the ground, being able to create force through the ground, the position of my lower bodies, my joint angles, the ability for me to hold my core solid, so realistically, that's my daughter. Say hello.
How's it going?
So like football is a unilateral game, right? As far as that, a blocker is always trying to take a size. So hold on one sec here.
I know we're going to get a cameo. I love it.
Sorry about
That is gonna be one tough to tackle kid when she's older.
that one is that's my scholarship kid right there. She's 3 and she's a monster.
I
So
love it, dude.
what I was saying is the unilateral nature of sport, in that a blocker is always taking you on one side because like the ball is supposed to go there. So they're trying to turn your shoulders. And similar to a tackle or running back, we're often taking contact on one side. So that's causing us to fight these anti-rotational forces and making sure we can keep our body square to actually transfer the power. Well, those things on spinal positions, spinal posture, spinal awareness, base, feet, the ability to generate force through the ground, right? Newton tells us we have to be able to push against something to, all that kind of stuff. Those are completely key. Now, because the goal or the tasks have different outcomes, one, I'm trying to bring you to the ground, and one, I'm trying to create actually space from you so that I can, defeating a block, my goal is to create space somehow so I can get away. In a tackle, I'm trying to take away all of your space because offense wants space. Defense is trying to reduce space. Mm-hmm. So there is a separate side of that where we go, okay, posturally, biomechanically, maybe power-wise, the intersection of power and control, all those things are 100% across contact skills. But our fundamental nature is, one, I'm trying to take away your space, stay connected to you. One, I want to create space, and realistically, you probably don't want a 320-pound Big Ten offensive lineman leaning on you for any longer than you have to. So you're trying to create space and then get away from him as fast as you can. So you're actually acting more like the ball carrier when you're defeating a block, and you're using force simply to stun him, to stop his charge, to create space, and then hopefully, go make a tackle and get on Sports Center instead of wrestle with a bear, because that's no fun.
Yeah, that would just be a dangerous type of play. But so you mentioned that you were putting out a program. What does page 1 after your table of contents? What does page 1 look like? Like, how is the first introductory process look for you guys at USA?
So it's actually interesting. So page 1 is actually a bit of a sales job. So being involved in youth football, we work quite a bit, like obviously in the long-term athlete development space. Mm-hmm. And as we know in youth sports, there's a rush to specificity, not just in sports and all those other things, but we have Twitter, we have Instagram, we have Big Ten Network, Longhorn Network, the Amazon series, Hard Knock series. We have so much insight into football now. What do you think everyone wants to do? Like those really cool, fun drills. And then have a first-time football player that clearly doesn't have any of the movement foundations, to be able to execute those skills. And at some point, and you guys will know this well, if you lack the physical capacity, like your coaching cues are meaningless. So you have, little Johnny who's at their first sporting event, and it could be football, it could be basketball, and the coach is yelling at them to get low. Well, if you don't have any leg strength, getting low becomes really difficult. So we have to address those things. So page 1 talks about, the idea that developing the physical qualities that underpin contact skills is an actual investment in their contact skills. So that a player who has postural awareness, spatial awareness, a kinesthetic sense of where their limbs are, all those kind of things, they're going to be able to have the raw tools to learn the sport-specific skill you're trying to teach. If they lack the core strength, the hip strength, the leg strength and all those things, it's going to be really hard to get them into those high quality, top level postures. So if we take the slow cooking approach, we can invest in, and we have about 10 physical qualities that we think underpin contact skills. And we're going to make sure we spend some dedicated time, and especially for the kids, in low stress, often game-based fun environments where we can start bringing about challenging their postures, challenging their core strength, challenging their spatial and kinesthetic awareness, introducing them. I joked about it earlier, but the sporting field is for a lot of kids nowadays, the first time you're allowed in someone else's personal space. You know, like unless you grew up with older brothers and you're roughhousing in the backyard and stuff, like, or older sisters. I apologize. I know they fight too. Just mind it. But it's like, keep your hands to yourself, out of each other's personal space. We'll say, gym class and recess look different because of liability concerns. If you don't have that rough and tumble play, now you go on a sporting field and some coach is yelling at you about boxing out and being physical, and another guy's yelling at you about drive blocking and this and that. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, I've never even felt that friction, that pressure. I've never been body to body with another human being in this competitive, kind of combative environment. We need to address those things first so that psychologically and physically you even have the tools to master that. So that's kind of what chapter 1 looks like before we even get into the nuts and bolts of what our progressions would look like and what areas we would choose our drills from.
That makes sense, because, like, I don't know, I personally have never played football. I know Will has a great background in football. I was a baseball, basketball kind of guy, but like baseball was nice. Like, I kind of stayed away from everything. I got to see the game. It was great. I got to hit a ball. Other people chased it. It was nice in that sense. But like, I never also had siblings growing up, so I never had that exposure of rough and tumble play. So like, when the thought of football came around, like bodies colliding, like collisions, everything like that, I don't know. It just, when I was younger, I didn't buy into that right away. But like baseball,
Yeah.
I got into, like, that was my jam.
And I'm sure you've seen it, obviously, because, with your basketball experience, that like there are some people that will love to muck it up and, like bump crossers and fight the screen and push you, over and under the screen. And there's other players that, like, they want to be athletic and smooth, and the physicality doesn't really appeal to them. And 100%, there's players in football who don't love the physicality. Like, they're really talented athletes, and that's, the physicality isn't their favorite part. Well, we have to at least make sure we can bring all of those players to a comfort level that they can successfully execute the job. And so, if I'm going to get a lot of rebounds and box out and be that guy who fights and scraps for loose balls, if I'm not him, like, you can just try to, curse him out and, challenge his manhood, or we can actually, like, do some fun competitive grappling drills and some crawling and some partner pushes, things that we get used to, that friction, that battle, those spaces. And then on the sports court or sports field, it's like, okay, like, I don't love it, but I have these tools. And I've actually had great feedback, and this is stereotypical, but from coaches of female soccer players who have said that, like, their confidence and enthusiasm, like shielding the ball and fighting for loose balls, has really developed since they started doing, like, partner push and hip battle drills and, like, sort of box out drills where they're just kind of trying to, it's just stress inoculation to that one particular aspect of the sport. Every sport has it. It's just a matter of how prevalent. If you're going to be a wrestler, a football player, a hockey player, you're going to deal with it a lot. And some other sports, it's just every so often. But soccer players are going to have to fight in the box and shield a ball. Baseball players, they get a free pass on that. Basketball players have to bump cutters and box out and fight for loose balls. Okay, so we'll dose it depending on the sport. But that's another reason why we think it's a great LTAD program, because it does have some global development aspects that we think apply to all youth. And depending on the age, simple crawling and grappling is great strength training for the super young, developing kid.
Yeah. Well, I actually kind of want to take this back to what we were talking about like 10 minutes ago, because I have a quick question on like the bag drills with tackling. So you said they are useful sometimes. My question is, like, when are they? Because if they're not going to consist of like that perception action component, and I remember because I played football in college and a little bit beyond college, and there's so much of someone holding a bag, maybe running at a half speed, and you go chase it down, tackle it, and the bag's what, like 6 pounds, it's soft, it provides no resistance, And I just always remember, like, I'm a junior in college. I'm 22 years old. Why am I doing this? Is that something that you would ever include for like a higher level football player, or is that really only something that you'd put in for the lower level athletes until they really get their tissue built up to start handling some higher forces and contact?
Yeah, so you're speaking my language here. I mean, this is stuff I love. So
I knew this would be a good conversation for you too. No.
Unresisted bags present a couple huge challenges. To your point, like I'm going to have to tackle a 260-pound tight end come game day. And for preparation,
Yeah.
I'm tackling a soft foam implement that weighs 6 pounds.
Yeah.
So obviously there's not that's not going to, help me prepare for those things from a physiological standpoint. But also we have to look at, I believe, from a technical standpoint. Technique breaks down often when we hit that huge resistance. That's when my spinal angles change. Most players lose their feet and stop driving their feet when they hit that resistance, and all of a sudden their feet go flat. Everyone can run through a bag that weighs 5 pounds, right? So again, the challenge of game day isn't actually there on when we do those bag drills. Now, for youngsters, again, who are building up their confidence, it's a great way to slowly stress inoculate, to slowly build up and give them progressively more challenges. So you're building up that stress. I use a unique set of bags that just came over here to the States. Ryland, the equipment manufacturer, now has the rights to them, but I think I had my first set 3 years ago. So like the tackle bags that I use, I have a 28-inch bag, so a very low, like a bag that's like leg height, weighs 72 pounds. We have a 35 and a 45-pound bag. They're much denser. They're big and around, so they actually have some clamp and some grip. Now, resisted bag work, where like if I'm going to get in behind the bag and provide some resistance that is going to challenge your posture, challenge your ability to hold your feet, to drive through, challenge your ability to actually create initial force. Those can be useful. Again, you lack some of the grappling. So what happens in most, I think, football programs is because the concern for injury and the physical loading of contact work, we take that aspect out. We're not doing a lot of live tackling or player-to-player tackling. So what we have to do is we really have to reassemble it in multiple means. Like there's not going to be a drill that meets everything. So for us, like we talk about our tracking drills, which is, like getting to the ball carrier and holding your leverage and all that stuff. Your tracking drills, if they're not 100% speed, they're a waste of time. Like there's no reason to ever track someone 50%. There's no reason to ever track someone 75% because you're not going to do that on game day. Now, the problem is we track someone 100%, but we don't want 100% contact. So we're going to do like a tag off. You see that in football all the time. Okay, well, then I'm going to have to supplement that with drills that are going to give me combative aspect of shoulder strike, of clamp, grip, grapple, finish, acceleration, like all of the things that I want post-contact. I'm going to have to manufacture those in another way. So we may do drills where we start pre-engaged, so there's absolutely no collision, but on the whistle, it's going to be 100% fight. So it's high force, but it is zero impact because we're starting pre-engaged. And that's just kind of the nature of the way most practices are structured, that we're always trying to reassemble it. So it's not perfect from a complete scale perception action situation, but the parts, I like to think the parts that we are training are 100% as specific and competitive as possible. It just may have to be 3 drills that equal what would be traditionally one full, complete, live action tackle. But, the idea to me that like your coach, he's, like you said, holding a shield or a bag in the air, it's not moving, and you're going to run from 3 yards away and hit it. And what most coaches use that as is a technical model, is I'm looking to see if you are showing me the perfect technical model of the perfect tackle. that's great. That's showing the coach that you know what he wants. It is 100% not showing if you can do that. And I think what the two drill categories are drills that show what the coach wants and drills that show the coach if the player can do it. And that's a big divide. And so, pick your favorite NFL team, pick your favorite running back, and then say, is tackling that shield getting you ready to tackle that guy? And you go, wait a second, there's some transference issues here. The same way, squatting the bar for your warm-up doesn't prepare you for your max effort attempt. You're going to have to build up those intensities and start to get used to that weight and get accustomed to it and comfort for it, or else it's going to be a rude wake-up when you go from, bar times 10, max effort attempt times 1. No one wants that jump. And I don't think our players deserve that jump on game day either.
Yeah. Sean, do we have time for another question?
5 minutes. 5 minutes,
Okay.
Yep.
So really quick question, because you talked about, because I've thought about this too, where they're doing the same drills week 2 to week 11, and they're not changing the dose, they're not changing the volume, not changing the intensity. I guess, how do you change the intensity, change the volume, change the dosing so it is appropriate dosing from week to week, that it is going to cause some sort of adaptation, whatever that adaptation needs to be for that part of the season?
Yeah, so for me, the 3 major things that we're going to add are going to be like speed and space, which are kind of going to be intertwined. Obviously, the more space, the more speed's going to be involved in the drill, just naturally. Complexity, and then information. So like if we start doing a one-on-one drill, and we're a yard apart and it's a very small space, and that we're just working on, say, punching our hands, and we're saying we're working it for accuracy, right? We want to show a perfect technical model and the accuracy of the hand strike. Okay, great. Well, instead of doing that, like you said, on week 11, pretty sure the players know what to do and where they're supposed to hit. And I bet you in the stationary environment, they can do it really, really well. So now we're going to start adding space and speed, because that's going to naturally change the timing. So now we're going to be aligned in different offsets. We're going to be aligned at different distances. We're going to be aligned. We're going to be moving at different speeds. So, sometimes slow, sometimes fast. We're trying to create a dynamic environment where the answer to the question should be, no matter what happens, you can hit the target. So not just you can hit the target in the technical model drill, you can hit it when you're moving, you can hit it when he's moving, you can hit it when we're both moving, you can hit it when he's upright, when he's hiding his chest from you, you can hit it when he's using his arms to shield himself. Okay, great. Now you have really great dynamic accuracy. Well, in football, you can't just have great dynamic accuracy. You have reads, you have chaos, you have decision making. So now I'm going to start adding mental stimuluses, or we talk a lot about, I use the term target acquisition, but eye shifts is really important, where most football plays, a player has to shift their eyes at least 2 or 3 times. So for instance, I'm a defensive back. I'm reading an offensive lineman to see if it's run or pass. Then I'm going to quickly snap my eyes to the receiver, who's my responsibility. I'm going to try to diagnose the route. Then I have to try to find the football and either break up the play or make the tackle. So I have 3 eye shifts on every play. Well, if your drills aren't incorporating any eye shifts, a simple way to add complexity to the drill is like, you need to see this thing, react to this thing, then find the target, then execute the skill, because that's what's going to be a more realistic game stress. So I want you to look at multiple things, and that target acquisition of, okay, can I make my read? Or, I've seen drills where coaches are just standing out there with 2 cones, a red cone and a yellow cone behind their back. And on the whistle, they just hold up a cone, and the player has to see the cone, yell out red, and then they have to do whatever the skill is. Well, it's not perception action coupling as it would be on game day, but we are working on a basic eye shift. And to me, that's at least a step in the right direction, where see something processing, shift my eyes, find the target, be under stress because I've got my eyes to the target later than I would in a traditional drill. Now, if my technique holds up, if I can still hit my KPIs after taking in 2 sources of information in an eye shift, I feel like my skill might be much more stable. Well, if you get really good, now we start adding multiple reads, and read one triggers movement one, read two triggers movement two. Then can you execute the skill in alignment with the KPI model? Again, to Sean's point, we allow for bandwidth because we understand the game's not realistic. So add complexity, add information, add space and speed. And if you take that pattern, I think you can take all of your current drills and just really build a nice progression by layering some of those items on top.
Awesome. Love it.
Very cool. Andy, thank you so much for spending time with us tonight. I know you're a busy man, but thank you for also introducing us to your family. That was cool.
Yeah, so we're actually on fall break, so I'm at the in-laws house down in the basement, but apparently the little ones wanted to play, so really appreciate the time. Sean, obviously it's been long overdue. Will, I feel like me and you will be communicating more. We have a couple similar, you believe.
Yep, love it.
Great talk, big man. Take care, all right?
Appreciate it. Have a good night.